Hello and welcome. This is Angie with theCountryChic.net here today with another fun video using Cricut tools this time. So even if you don't have a Cricut machine, you can make this cute wreath as well just with some Cricut hand tools. So this video is sponsored by Cricut, however all projects and opinions are my own. So we're going to jump right in, we're going to get started, and I'm going to show you how to make this wreath without any Cricut machine required. So here we go. So to make your bunny wreath, you're going to need some fabric in a variety of colors, like spring colors are great. You're going to need two different sizes of wreath forms. So I'm using a big and a small, so one for the body, one for the head. Then you're going to need some cutting tools. So we're not going to use our Cricut for this project, so we're going to use some of their cutting tools instead. So the first thing we're going to use is what my project is resting on, which is the decorative self-healing mat. Now, this mat is huge at 18 by 24. I have it on the decorative side, but you could also reverse it, and it has a measuring grid on the opposite side. And then we're going to use the cutting ruler, which helps protect your hand while cutting, with the rotary blade, also from Cricut, which we're going to use. This is the 60mm version. Then we're going to use the acrylic ruler for measuring. We're going to use our True Control knife, which is a craft knife. And then we're actually going to use some iron-on, but we're not going to use our Cricut machine, so we're going to cut this with scissors, as well as our Cricut Easy Press. And then you'll also need some cardboard. So this is actually off of the box that some of these supplies came in, so any cardboard will work for that portion of the project. So I'm actually going to start by making the ears, just because I want to use this plain white fabric, and I don't want to run out of it and use it all on my bunny. So we're going to make the ears first. We're going to need our cardboard for this. And so this form is the head, so we want to make the ears in proportion to the head. And I'm just going to use my craft knife to cut the cardboard into an ear-like shape. So these don't have to be perfect at all, but you do want them approximately sized correctly so they work with your bunny head, whatever size you choose to make that. So I'm not going to tell you what size to make the ears. I'm not going to tell you what size to buy your wreath forms. You can absolutely do this however you would like. But we do want the ears to be similar in shape and size. So that looks pretty good. And it looks proportional to our head piece. So now I'll just use my craft knife and keep working through all the layers of the cardboard until those ears are released. So you want to use caution when using your craft knife. So don't be sure not to get your hands under it or you would cut yourself. And then we're going to cut two ears. So these are our two ears. Now, you can compare them now. And I mean, these are close to the same shape and size, so I'm good. I might trim the second one off in length a little bit. But otherwise, they're similar enough for me. So they do not have to be exact for this project. But I am going to trim the second one off just slightly in length. And now when we compare them, they're roughly the same size and shape. So we're going to run with those two as our ears. Now we're going to cover those in white fabric, as well as add a little bit of iron-on in pink to make the centers of our ears. So we're just going to cut the fabric slightly larger than our earpiece, and I'm just going to use fabric scissors to do that cutting. So you just want enough to fold over the back so that you have finished sides. So since this is a wreath, it's always going to be hanging on the door, so I'm not going to finish the back. You could finish the back with an additional piece of fabric if you would like. So the next thing we're going to do is cut some iron-on to size. So we just want these to fit like the centers of the ears. So we can actually use this. Use it to get an approximate width. And then And you can trim it some more if you don't like how this turned out. The point is just to get a center for your ear. Doesn't have to be perfect once again. And that looks pretty good, so I'll cut a second one out of the iron-on as well. So here we have two pieces that are about the same shape and size. They work well on the ears. So now we can iron those onto the white pieces of fabric. So I have my Easy Press heating up to the time and temperature, and then I just laid both of my iron-on pieces onto the white. So I'm going to use a small Easy Press for this, but it's big enough that I can get both of these in one press. So I'm going to start by pressing once to get all the wrinkles out and preheat the fabric, just for a few seconds. Then I can add my pieces onto the ears, approximately in the center, but you can correct this later. You can correct this later when you add it to your cardboard. And then we're going to press for the appropriate time and temperature and press down on the handle. Then once it's done, you can hear it beep. We'll lift it up. We'll press from the back for a few seconds. And then we can peel back that carrier sheet and our iron-on will be on our ears. So then we'll just lift our carrier sheets off and our ears are ready to be added to our cardboard pieces. So we're going to take the ear pieces, lay them face down on the mat, and then lay your cardboard piece over the top. Now, the bottom of this is going to be hidden within your wreath, so you don't have to worry about that bottom being finished. So I'm just going to line up the cardboard with the bottom, and then fold these pieces over the cardboard and secure with hot glue. So you can flip it around to the front and see that everything looks good, and then we'll just continue to adhere this excess fabric to the back until we have a finished appearance on the front. And there we have one finished earpiece, and we'll repeat for the second one. Now I can set our two ears aside and start on the wreath portion of the tutorial. So what I'm going to do is flip this mat over to the grid side so you can see how to use sort of both sides of the self-healing mat. So we're going to flip the entire thing. And so each of these grids is a 1-inch grid. And so you can use those to measure your fabric. So the first thing we're going to do is cut this fabric into strips. So we want these strips to be 6 inches by 1 inches. So the first thing you'll need to do, so I'm going to use my acrylic ruler and my fabric, and I'm going to see how wide it is. So this fabric is all in 12-inch strips approximately already. So I can cut it into two 6-inch strips. Now, your measurements do need to be somewhat exact, but they don't have to be perfect. So if this is 5 7/8, for example, in each strip, then that will be fine. So I'm just going to cut this in half. So I want to do 2 layers at a time. So I'm folding the entire thing in half. And then I want to cut 6-inch strips on both sides. So I'm going to lay the fabric where it's running along one line on my mat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, count up 6 on both sides. And then we can take the cutting ruler and lay it across that line. So we have 6 up on both sides, and the cutting ruler is laying across here. So the cutting ruler, actually this lip helps protect your hand while you're cutting, so you can use your rotary cutter and you just pull this lever, pulls the safety piece back and reveals the blade, and then you just run your rotary cutter up next to the cutting ruler while holding your hand on the ruler firmly behind the protective strip. And we're trying to get through both of these pieces of fabric at one time. There may be a few places where it doesn't go through. So it went through all of them at one time. So now I have 2 6-inch strips of fabric, and I want to cut those into 1-inch lengths. So now what I'm going to do, again, I'm going to cut the fabric all at one time. So I can get, if I use my measuring ruler, I can get 13 of these strips, and then I'll have just a little bit of scrap left over, but I'm okay with that. So I'm going to go ahead and do it that way. And again, I can line it up on the mat along one of the lines, and then go to the next line, and that'll be a 1-inch. Now, what if you want an odd measurement? Well, each of these smaller X's or plus signs in the middle is actually a 1/4 inch. So you have 1 1/4, 1 1/2, and 1 3/4 that you can also line up on to get odd measurements if you need to off of your self-healing cutting mat. So now I'm just going to cut 1-inch strips, and we need several, so I'm just going to keep moving my ruler and cutting because I need so many strips for this project. You could absolutely just do one and then stop if you only needed a few for our project, but because I need so many, I'm just going to keep going. And then I'll show you how to tie them onto your wreath form. So that yielded a bunch of fabric strips in just minutes, and then the piece that was over here that was our excess, that was a little bit to excess at the end after our 13 inches, it's actually about 1 inch wide, so I'm actually going to use it too. So this wreath isn't really fussy about the sizes, but it does look better to have them all at least somewhat the same size. So I'm going to keep cutting, and I'm going to cut different white and pink fabrics for my wreath. So the color scheme is completely going to be up to you, so whatever color scheme you would like to use on yours. But I'm going to cut several different fabrics and into strips, and then we'll tie them on our wreath. So within a few minutes I have tons of strips cut, and now we can start tying them on our wreath forms. So what I've done is I've started just a little bit here, but I'll go through the process. So you want to vary the strips and where they're located on the wreath form. So I wouldn't want a whole bunch of white in one area or a whole bunch of this pink all in one area. So I need to skip around as I tie them on the wreath form. And then all I'm doing is wrapping them around the wires in the form and tying one knot. And then I'll just continue that until this entire wreath form is full, as well as the entire wreath form for the body of my rabbit. And then I'll come back and show you how to put all of this together into a bunny wreath along with the ears we made at the start of the video. So now I have the big wreath and the little wreath complete with all of my fabric strips, and now we're going to tie the two together. So I left a few fabric strips out, and we can just wrap those around the top band of the big wreath and the bottom band of the small wreath and tie them off. Then just tie it off. And do this in a couple of different places so that the two pieces are held together. And then we'll heat up the glue gun and we'll add our ears. So now our two pieces are tied together, and we just need to add the ears to the top portion, so the head portion. And we're just going to use some hot glue and we're going to glue them down inside the wreath. So you want the bottom of the ear to be covered by the rag fringe. But you always want to be careful when you're using hot glue with your self-healing mat. You don't want any to drip onto it because it will ruin the surface. And finally, as an option, you can actually tie a bow around the neck. So I'm going to use a burlap ribbon and just wrap and tie a bow around the neck portion of my wreath. So just around the center where the small and large forms meet. Just going to tie a cute bow. Then we can cut off the excess ribbon, and our wreath is ready to hang. So that was fun, right? Like, it's super, super easy to make a bunny wreath for your home. So this spring, make a bunny for your home, just like this one, with the instructions and your Cricut hand tools. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you have any questions at all, leave them in the comment section below. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube and subscribe so you don't miss any of the Cricut crafts, even the crafts that do not use a Cricut.